this Monday.
Like Donovan and myself, like I feel like last year, what'd y'all say, thunder and lightning? It's lightning and lightning, you know what I'm saying? So
Lightning and lightning. That was Blake Corum, Michigan running back. And I say ride the lightning. And, Michigan may do that. Big part of their offense is going to be riding the lightning of Corum and Donovan Edwards in the backfield. Welcome in Michigan football today. Wherever you may be taking this one in, we are here live weekdays at 1 o'clock. And wait for it. We're talking about the latest in Michigan sports. And today you start looking ahead towards the college football season. If you haven't been doing that every single day all summer long, we're getting down to it where you can peek around the corner and you can actually see it and you can feel it, you can smell it, you can do all of those things. And I want to tell everybody about what we're talking about today and just this couple things for you to be aware of. If you're listening to this on the podcast, make sure you look at the description below the podcast because I list everything. We list everything that we're going to be talking about so you can toggle forward to what interests you the most. Same thing with YouTube. You have the availability to do that. And so if, you don't like me telling everybody that you can toggle everything or, saying a few fun and entertaining things about my weekend or whatever else at the beginning, you just skip ahead to get into the meat of the conversation. Your feedback is always welcome. I put your message in real time up on the screen. If you're watching this live, if you are taking this one in on Twitter Spaces and you want to leave either a tweet or you can jump in and get on the show, that is available for you. So all of that going on. And what we are talking about today is just how Michigan is looking. It is technically week 0 that just came into play a couple years ago, week 0. And you say, well, week 0 sounds weak. Well, it's college football. And if you do peer ahead towards Saturday out in Ireland, you are going to have Nebraska and Northwestern locking horns. And if that game was anywhere from week 1 to week 12, the chances that I would take that one in, very low. But it being week 0 and it involving some Big Ten teams and certainly one that is on Michigan's schedule, then I'll be taking that game in. In fact, I'll be looking forward to it. I'll be game planning around the week 0 game this Saturday. So as far as what we will be tackling today, we will discuss how Michigan is looking. We've got a practice update for you, and then we will start things out with week 0, and that takes us right to this Saturday. And Ireland and games, these are things that we just deal with. I know like the Michigan basketball team, they're playing Kentucky this year in England. And it's great for the kids. Like the Michigan basketball team is playing overseas right now. They already played a game in France. And, they're going to go and they're going to play in Greece, 2 games, I think. And then they'll be back. None of those games are available for us to watch. The point about this one in Ireland, expanding the brand and trying to make football global. We had NFL Europe. We've had different things. And they do like basketball over in England. Part about it, it's like, if you're a Michigan basketball fan, would that be a nice trip? If you've never been to London, never been to England, you fly over and you take a couple of days in, seeing the sights and sounds there in London, watch a basketball game, then you come on back. Yeah, I like it. If you go and, you see people, if you can afford it, you think like you're over there to see a different country, not Michigan basketball. Funny thing is, you go to a different country, everything is so different, having a little familiarity of home. isn't all that bad. I can remember one of the first times I went to London, all these different pubs and all these different restaurants and everything else. You know where I went to eat? McDonald's. I went to eat at McDonald's, what it was going to be like at a McDonald's London. I wouldn't do it. I was young, probably 18, 19, maybe 15 years old when I first did that. It's not the same thing, going somewhere else. It's like you just, feel a little bit like home. Maybe you don't like the food, but that's a long way to get us to Ireland to watch Nebraska and Northwestern. And look, what I want, Michigan to play on week 0, them to be playing on August the 27th over in Ireland. No, I wouldn't want that. Although I wouldn't mind going to Ireland. So, maybe if the Maize and Blue Review sent me over there. But it sounds like I'm kind of wishy-washy on these games. It's like, I don't really care where it's played. I like watching it. It can be weird. It's like when the NFL plays NFL London games. It doesn't have sometimes the fields looks wacky and the crowd doesn't cheer. It's almost like it's a video game cheer where it seems at times it's like pumped in, or it's like a soccer crowd where you're at a soccer game. It's not sorry, soccer fans, like not incredible action all the time. So people are just out in the stands like, hey, 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 and that's what they do. And you might catch that this Saturday for the game in Ireland. They're just, singing a bunch of rugby songs out in the stands, and then be maybe a little bit of turn off for you. But there it is for week 0. Nonetheless, all of that, I'm there. I'm waiting. I'm counting down the minutes. I'm making a pick on that game. I've liked Northwestern plus the points, and away we go. So let's get to a practice here, and we are talking about practice, and this is one of the other things that we're going to get to before we go today. Is there's a lot of different things on your mind as a Michigan football fan, and if you've been watching Michigan football for any length of time, and then you get to the off season and you watch shows like, this, everybody is looking for every little morsel, every little tidbit, every little thing that you can talk about. Now they're getting into the last week of camp because next Monday it's game week. So it'll be different. The practice, the periods today, the snaps, I'm sure they'll be honing it in and getting ready for week 1. But if you're a player right now, and if you're not secure with your starting job, or you're not feeling like that, you want to, however you pace yourself to get ready for September the 3rd, these guys streamlining it and everything else with their reps to get that offense and clicking, get their scheme in on defense. And we do know there's going to be people and players that are still fighting for a starting job. I could give you a starting 2 deep, and I'd be pretty damn close for September the 3rd. Sure, an injury could crop up. You hope that doesn't happen. And somebody could, there are a couple close battles. I don't think the quarterback, I'd be shocked today or anytime over the next 2 weeks, if 12 days, if JJ McCarthy, ends up being the starter at quarterback. But there's a lot of different spots, like rush end would be one. I think it's going to be Mike Morris and Taylor Upshaw that'll be the starters there. But would it be a huge shock if it was somebody else at defensive end? Jalen Harrell, maybe instead of Taylor Upshaw? No, that would not be, you should not be shocked or surprised by that. Just like safety. If I had to guess, I would think that Rod Moore and Makari Page, so 19 and 7, but could it be RJ Moten? Could it be 6 and 7 back there? Any combination of those three who will probably split the snaps? Could it be all three of them out there? And, because of the different look, sure, and so that's not a huge surprise or anything to, I say, melt down or even like, so who's it going to be? Like, I don't know if Harbaugh or Minter right now. Absolutely. I'm sure if they had to, pen it out, a pretty good idea, probably even a better idea than me on who it's going to be there. So as far as practice news, if you are a member of the Maize and Blue Review, you have seen Josh Henschke. He has been divvying out practice news if not every day, every other day, and it is happening. So check that out on the Maize and Blue Review. Now, things that you can talk about today, and you can join us here, is the fan focus. And here's what I'm focusing on 2 weeks or whatever, 12 days before the opener. September is going to be a lot of fun. You have Michigan with they're going to get criticized a little bit. That's going to be okay with me, that they are not playing a Power 5 school. They're not going to have one next year either. That's where it's at. There have been a lot of years that if Michigan has had a tough non-conference slate, one of the toughest, there have been, at least one game that you would look at, and then you would look as a Michigan fan across the country and say, that team doesn't play anybody. We're not going to know anything about them forever. They're going to be overrated. All of those things I'm expecting to hear about Michigan. I think there will be a lot of people that will talk about, well, we don't know anything about Michigan. They're overrated. And half of that certainly will be true. We're not going to know a whole lot or everything about Michigan, and that's going to be the product when you don't, even as and even though some of these teams, I don't know, I think they're going to blow out all three of the teams, and I think they're going to be Maryland too, but there's always this guy, well, they're a little bit better than maybe you thought, or, all of that plays into it. But leading up towards Saturday in the opener, that's certainly going to be talked about. But, for me, if, you're a Michigan fan, I would say, look at September and just have some fun. There's no stress, really. I think it's going to be a stress-free September. It's going to be a very enjoyable September. You're going to be able to watch these teams. They are games. They're not practice, but it's in a lot of ways, you're going to see a lot of the different guys being able to play theoretically. And, that should be a lot of fun. Michigan should be 4-0 without too much stress. So have a great time in September. You're not going to get hurt. You are not going to have it all end on one Saturday. It doesn't feel like any of those things are possible. So just go into September and feel good about it. Now, answering the question whether Michigan's the real deal or not, or if they can hang with Ohio State, things that we have been talking about all summer long. And then one that I proposed last week to our message board, Wolverine Den, that most folks agreed with me. I asked if 10-2 is a good year for Michigan this year. And in some of the past years, you'd say 10-2 is a good year. Yes. People would be running. Last year, people would be running up to the counter to take a 10-2. Do you think 10-2 is a good record for Michigan this year? And because of their schedule and because of the talent that we have all discussed and we look at on that Michigan team, 10-2, and we don't know. We understand that strange things can happen, injuries can happen, all of that's being said, but we're talking about today. We're talking about Michigan football today, the 22nd of August, 12 days before the opener. And would 10-2 be a good year for Michigan this year? And I don't think it would be a disaster, but I don't think it would be good. So wherever between okay and good is, that's where 10-2 is. But when you have a kind of team that Michigan has, is it gonna feel good, or is it gonna be a good year if you're talking, well, double-digit win? After the season, I'm sure, there'll be people running things out there on Twitter and, hey, double-digit victory again, or double-digit wins again, for Harbaugh and all this. You'd frame it up the best possible way you could heading into a bowl game about Michigan winning double-digit games and all that, and where they deserve to go, New Year's Eve, Six Bowl, whatever. But as we sit here today, 10-2 would be a disappointment because of what Michigan has. And what do they have? They have a great schedule. And it's not just the ease of the September schedule. They do get to warm up with these teams, but then they also get a Maryland team. And I know some people have talked about that being a trap game and watch out for Tunga Vailoa. Okay. I hear you on that, but that's a nice opener, and it's at home for Michigan. Nice schedule there. You are going to have to play some road games in the Big Ten. And the last one, which we'll talk about, and then Iowa. Iowa's Michigan's second toughest game on their schedule. But after they play 4 relatively easy games, they should be ready to go on the road and, against an Iowa team that I don't think is going to be as good as last year. And, they should have every chance in the world to win that game, even though historically, even though the last time that they went there, they lost and they were undefeated and, top 5 team of the country, and Iowa wasn't very good. And it was at night. It's tough to play at Iowa. It's really tough to play at night at Kinnick Stadium, all those things. But I think Michigan should win that game. So 11-0, and you have those 3 games with Michigan State, Penn State, and Nebraska. Could they lose one of those? Absolutely. Could they lose 2 of them? That would be a disappointment. And then, so for me, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of people making predictions over the next 12 days or so. 10-2 when I started sound like if you just want to be like extremely reasonable, a prudent selection for Michigan this year, 10-2, because it's really hard to go 11-0. And could they? You say, well, what if somebody predicts them to lose 3 games? Is that crazy, or are they a hater? Well, I'm saying it's very prudent to say 10-2. So a third one, could they lose to Penn State, Michigan State, or Nebraska at home? In addition to Ohio State and Iowa, their 2 toughest games? Certainly. And that's not a crazy. That doesn't mean you were a hater. You could say you could even feel like that's likely. I think the most likely would be 10-2, but I'm picking Michigan to go to 11-0. And I think they can beat Iowa. The more I look at the Iowa team, their linebackers are fantastic. They lose 3 out of the 4 players in their secondary. Their offense is terrible. And I know that game is on the road, but Michigan should be able to go in there with everything they had before and beat Iowa. And so having all of those other games at home, they should win those too. And so that's why I'm picking 11-1 as we sit here today. Let's work back to front on some of these messages, and let's get to them right now as we look at them. Here's Iron S. Predicts Michigan will go 11-1 in the regular season, but I hope the loss is not to the Buckeyes. I'd rather they lose to anyone else except Michigan State. Yeah, well, I think everybody completely understands where you're coming from there, Iron S. And we've been over the whole Michigan State thing, and we talked about it a lot on Friday because it was, what about the Michigan State game? And since I'm a year removed from saying that Michigan had to win, it was a must-win game in East Lansing, or everything should be shut down, or, the coach certainly should be shown the door, and that they did beat Michigan State, and then they had a fantastic year making it to the college football playoff. So, not like I would be, the whole sign me up game, would you take this or that? But if Michigan lost to Michigan State again this year, but yet won all their other games, got to the college football or got to the Big Ten championship game and got to the college football playoff, sign me up for that. Sign me up for that, even though I don't want to sign up, for a loss to Michigan State, so that's kind of it's always a weird thing. But we make those deals. You get these propositions. I never saw the movie. I think Demi Moore is in an Indecent Proposal, where I think you're like some rich guy comes up to you and says, hey, if I could spend the night with your wife for $1 million, do you take that deal? I don't know how it goes. Like, so they're sitting there. I don't know if is it Robert Redford or George Clooney. I don't know who the guy is that's making the Indecent Proposal. And I don't know if it looks like they're going to accept. Isn't Woody Harrelson in that movie? It looks like the couple is going to accept, one night for, to be millionaires. But my guess is that's not how it ends. Like, she doesn't just sleep with the millionaire. They don't get the money and then they go on. I'm guessing it's going to be different than that. Kevin, let's get to him. That dude from Fox who wanted clickbait with his top 25 is a hater. There's no doubt about that, Kevin, but you got to say it really worked well. And you'd say, well, you want to look like a jackass? Well, I don't know if anybody really wants to look like a jackass, but a lot of people will willingly look that way if it means they get a lot of hits. And a lot of times, like when you discuss a show like this, you look and say, well, I don't know, how many hundred people you got, how many people you got watching? And if you want, like, I had 5,000 people watching. Like if I just came on here, like was undressing Harbaugh, I'd talk about all of our competition, like the Maize and Blue reviews, and say, that guy's a joke and this guy's a clown. I would think that, I could get more hits. And for some people, it's all about hits. And clickbait is good. And if he came up with a very reasonable selection, like, hey, Michigan's in the top 10, and I think they could lose to Ohio State and Iowa. And, it was as obvious as everything, because coming out of spring, the same dude had picked Michigan in his top 25 in the preseason. Now he was, talking about them like losing every game, and it's a joke. And, it went viral. Even the frickin' Michigan football team's account on Twitter put that guy's prediction on their timeline to be like, look at this guy's a clown. 400, million, or I don't know, 1,000 views later, Kevin, this guy's, sitting around laughing, selling everybody like, look, I go viral all the time. Look what happens. It reminds me of covering Michigan back in the day when Lloyd Carr was the coach. I'd have like my 5 questions that I wanted answered, that I thought the fans wanted answered, and a question that I had that I was looking for a nice 15-second piece of audio that I could play in my pregame. So I'd have those 5 questions. Sometimes I'd ask more, sometimes I'd ask less. But Carr, we were waiting around all day for him, and Carr goes up and he's mad, and he gets up to the podium. First of all, I'm not talking with you or you. He gets up there, and Drew Sharp's an embarrassment to a great newspaper. He says something like that. Well, then I've got things to do. You're spending 45 minutes up there at this Monday news conference. But before he even gets into taking any questions, Drew Sharp's there. And Drew Sharp now, because Drew wrote like the Big Ten sucks and Michigan's never going to win anything, which if you knew Drew Sharp, he wrote every year. He always was trolling specifically Michigan, but he would troll Michigan State. And then if it wasn't those two, he trolled the entire conference. That's what he did. So here he was saying Lloyd Carr's a clown and the Big Ten's a joke and Michigan won't win. So Carr has to have this sidebar conference with Drew Sharp, and they're out of the room for a half hour. And well, meanwhile, we got a lot of things going. And here he is. I think a lot of people looked at that and say, hey, why not just be a blank Cole? And, you can get the coach, you get a sidebar with the coach, you get millions of people. And I can remember talking with Drew, started working with him a couple of years after that in Detroit. And, people would always say, boy, his editor must hate him, all the calls he gets on a Monday. And I remember saying that one time to Drew, like, boy, your editor must really get worn out. He said, my editor loves the calls. He knows when he listens to his voicemail back in the day, his inbox now, when he's got 300 irate Michigan fans saying, I'll never read this paper again, you're a joke. That's what they want. Here I am spending 5 minutes on this guy. And if he'd have just been very reasonable, nobody would even know who he is. DJ wants a reckoning against Sparty. Yeah, well, I think you should feel pretty good, DJ, about Michigan's chances heading into the season against Michigan State on the 29th this year. 1, I think Michigan's the more talented team. 2, the game's at home. 3 is that Michigan is changing their approach up top and how they deal with Michigan State. It's not, let's not talk about Michigan State. Let's talk about everybody else. Let's ignore MSU. The fan base loves it. When you do that, they'll eat it up. And instead, Jim Harbaugh addressed him immediately and said it was one of their top goals to beat Michigan State this year. Smart move, I think, by Jim Harbaugh. So I feel pretty good about Michigan's chances heading into the season against Michigan State. And, I see a lot of Michigan State. So I'm starting at the back and moving up. So IS saying they have to get revenge on MSU. No doubt. No doubt they need to win that game. And revenge, should be on Michigan's mind and, your fans' mind and everything else like that. Let's get through here. We did talk about practice and United Kingdom needs to be in the Big Ten East. Yeah, there you go. There you go. As we move forward here to Otis, who's more curious about the edge rushers than he is about the quarterbacks. And I can understand that. The thing about the edge rushers is if you only had one edge rusher, and in the history of college football, you only played one edge rusher, and then sometimes some teams tinkered with two edge rushers, and then, and that'd be stupid because you have two out there. But if teams never took them off the field and they had to stay in there, then meanwhile there was another team that rotated three or four, you would say that team, I don't know, that's dangerous. And, that's why it's, it's hard to get away from the quarterback battle. Most important position in sports, and it's got a history of not working when you play multiple quarterbacks, certainly rotating them. It has blown seasons up. It sets yourself up for disaster. And what was I reading today? They were, just, giving their forecast on teams, and it got to Michigan, and they said they made the remark that it worked great last year for Michigan, the two quarterback system that they called it, a two quarterback system. And I didn't really look at last year as a two quarterback system when Michigan was playing, Northern Illinois and Western. JJ McCarthy was getting a lot of snaps, but did JJ McCarthy get, how many snaps did he get against Wisconsin and Nebraska? Not many. Against Penn State, did he even have one snap against Penn State? That's not a rotation. Sure, they'd put him hand the ball off against Wisconsin to start the second half, or they had him down in the goal line package, I think, against Wisconsin. My point was, in the bigger games, there wasn't a rotation. In the one game where you could say that, McCarthy was in there and it really was kind of a rotation in the second half, or even in the whole thing, and McCarthy was against Michigan State. McCarthy threw a sweet split-legged touchdown to Andrell Anthony in the first half. It was an awesome throw. But we know in the second half, he had some ball security issues, and Michigan lost that game. I don't think Michigan played it deftly last year with, the quarterback carousel, whatever you want to call it, just the playing time for McCarthy. And if Michigan didn't win the Big Ten and beat Ohio State, people would be saying Harbaugh screwed up with the quarterbacks, because the game that they lost against Michigan State, people were saying that. You forget about that because they bounced back so nicely from the loss against Michigan State, the way they beat Penn State, and of course, punching Ohio State in the mouth and then beating Ohio State the way they did. So you got me talking about the defensive ends by saying you weren't that interested in the quarterbacks. I'm interested to see how they rotate the defensive ends in there, but I think they're going to play during the season. I think they're going to play 4. And in September, I think that they're going to play regularly in the first half 6. And in the game, you'll see 8. So we're going to see so many. I agree that it is a very important position for Michigan. It's an important position to be able to put pressure on the opposing quarterbacks. Football is a lot of things, stopping the run. But it's a passing game as much as it is anything at every level of football right now. So being able to get to the passer is very important. And Michigan just lost 2 of their best ones ever. And so filling that void Getting back to this question for a second that I put up there, like 10-2, is it a good year? And the September fun. And it gets you, we talked about concerns last week, but when it comes to, Michigan's defense overall, there is a notion that Michigan can be better. And I believe that myself. And you have to explain yourself when you say that because, Aiden Hutchinson and Ajabo, just the production that those two guys had and that Dax Hill went into the first round. Does Michigan, sitting here on paper looking at the team today, do they have this great NFL draft capital or high-end draft picks on this roster heading in? No, and that's why, Harbaugh was calling him a no-star. Yeah, probably Mozzie Smith could, you can make a case he could be a high-end NFL draft pick. And if he goes out and has a great year, I think, hell, he could be in the first round. Do I think DJ Turner could play himself the skill set on the athleticism that he has? If he has a great year, do I think he could move himself up very high and even into the first round? Yes. So we don't know. That is a knock. I think that's a fair concern or assessment, at least heading into the season. Like, yeah, but does Michigan have the playmakers or high-end NFL draft personnel on that defense? And you say, well, heading in, probably not. So that is something to consider. Okay, let's get a quick view of speaker requests. Okay, let's do it. Let me take a quick look here. We've got Matt on Twitter saying he thinks the 2-quarterback plan is great or can be, but they can't be so predictable when it comes to JJ. Just don't bring him in to run the option. Give him some actual part of the playbook and give him some time. But I think Iowa is going to be a tough test, especially if it's at night. Yeah, I would put my money on it being at night. Yeah, last year, if you try to get a feel for, and McCarthy did come in some short yardage situations or down by the goal line, he's got better wheels than McNamara, but he was also given some other, here and there. He was given a little bit of the playbook. But I'm with you, Matt, and I think everybody understands that in September that McCarthy's going to get, if he doesn't, which it doesn't look like, win the job for the opener, that he's going to get put in there and that he's going to get more opportunity to show what he can do. And the playbook's going to open up even more for him. That should be expected. That should happen. If not, we're all going to sit around, yelling at Harbaugh come the 4th of September. They run the ball all game long against Colorado State. And you see a mop-up duty for J.J. McCarthy. People aren't going to like that. That's and we always go into a game and say, hey, what do you hope happens? Well, number one, a win. Okay, yeah, number one, a win. Number one, a win. Number two, I want to see McCarthy get a legitimate chance to do some things. That's number two for me. And you can easily put it up to number one if you say, well, these games are all going to be easy. Michigan's going to win for sure, which I agree with, but I'll still start at number one. What I want to see is victories. But number two, I want to see J.J. McCarthy get an opportunity to do some things. I don't want to see mop-up duty. I don't want to see a snap here or there. I want to see extended time. I want to see what he can do. I would like to see what he can do with the game hanging in the balance. I wouldn't mind him starting one of the games. So it's number two on my list, even though Otis is more concerned about edge rushers, and I understand that. This year's Michigan defensive unit will surprise a lot of people, and they will get more sacks as a total this year. Yeah, well, remember, maybe that will happen, and I don't think they're all going to come from the 25 sacks are going to come from two guys. I'm with you on that. There was one thing I didn't like last week or the week before from Jesse Minter. He talked about scheming things up. When I hear scheming things up, that's always, to me, code words for we don't have that talent, so we got to scheme it up. Let's look for some more feedback MC saying, JJ, use him more like Florida used Tebow. That could be great things. Well, if you're talking about when Tebow was a freshman and Florida had Chris Leak, they just used Tebow in short yardage situations down on the goal line. They didn't really have a Tebow package where you would say they were. So that's not the way I remember it, Matt. Tebow was, used down at the goal line. Guy's a hell of a runner. Leak was the passer. Tebow, the runner. Hyperion on Twitter saying the secondary is the biggest concern, losing Dax. Yeah, well, we've been over this on defense. To me, the biggest concern is at linebacker depth. And they have Junior Colson and Nakai Hill-Green, and then you get to those defensive rush ends that we've talked about, Upshaw and Morse. They got a lot of guys, but then on the outside, I think, and on inside, we can start talking about the guys that are behind them. There hasn't been a lot of game reps for the players. If we're saying Michigan's got a 3-4, there has not been a lot of game experience. And heck, even for the starters, Colson started a lot of games, and there's been some starts in there, but real significant snap share. Yeah. I'd say linebacker depth. I would also say defensive tackle depth. I like Mozzie Smith. Everybody does. And I do think that Chris Jenkins is going to be good. But then we're going to start talking about who else. As Rayshawn Benny, maybe these guys are going to be ready. And we have heard good things. Like 2 weeks ago, I heard that Rayshawn Benny was having a good camp. That's good. It's good to hear. And what was it? Iuwanu has had a nice camp. Those are good things. These are guys that are going to be in the 2 deep. These are guys that if you're a real big-time Michigan football fan that but even in the opener when 92 or 26 come running out of the field, you're going to be like, who's this guy? So I'm more to get to the concern if there is a unit. I'm more concerned. In secondary, their 2 starting corners are back, and Will Johnson's knocking on the door. And Rod Moore started in the back half of the season at safety, and Page and Moten have started some games. I feel pretty good about them. I mean, I'm not saying these guys are all Americans and it's just automatic, but I'm more concerned about linebacker and defensive tackle depth than I am in the secondary. But I could see, being more concerned about safety depth and corner depth when you put in a defensive backs, all of that. I get where you're coming from. All right, we've got some more feedback in here. Let's do it. Otis John Jr. saying Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant will play this year. What a freshman duo. Yeah, I think you're right. They're expected to. I do wonder how much you can expect. And I know true freshmen have gone out, even at defensive tackle, even on the offensive line, even though that wasn't a thing. It is a thing now, but how much are you really expecting from Grant and Graham? I'm not expecting a whole lot. I'm expecting just a little bit. I mean, 6 snaps a game, 6 to 10 snaps. I mean, not a lot. Other people talking about Graham and holding his own in the spring game. Yeah, I see it. Let me just look here. Kevin is, telling everybody where he's going to be at. Yeah, I'm with you. I can't wait either. There's a part about this season, 10-2 would be disappointing. The captain, 10-2 isn't good. It's not terrible. It'll feel like 2018 disappointing would be right. Yeah. It's good to see Antoine here. Mason has a very high motor. If you're going to use somebody like Tebow, Orgy's your man. I agree with you. Antoine, you're right. If Cade can't improve, we need JJ's skill set to win a national championship. Maybe. The thing about JJ is I've got it's not every pass that he made last year was great. I mean, there were some passes like the Northwestern he ran out. It kind of looked like Mahomes threw across his body and missed the guy by 5 yards. It was a bullet. And you're like, okay, not everything's perfect, but he looked great from what we saw from him. We know his credentials coming out of high school, and then we saw him on the field. He's got very good wheels. He's got an excellent arm, and all of those things, fabulous for JJ McCarthy. So he could be the best Michigan quarterback that's ever played. Really could. That's what he's at least flashed. Now, so that's where I'm at on one side with JJ McCarthy. He could be. And this is not just like all based on high school recruiting, it's part of it, but just a little bit we saw from him last year. He looks like he could be one of the greatest, if not the greatest quarterback that ever played at Michigan. The only other side to that, it was only a couple years ago that I loved the Michigan offense heading into the 2019 season, and I really liked Dylan McCaffrey. If you remember the year before as a freshman, he came in when Patterson had cramps at Notre Dame, handled himself pretty well. Threw a couple of key passes, looked good. Came in when Michigan killed Nebraska in mop-up duty, threw like a 50-yard bomb. Beautiful pass by McCaffrey, and then he took off right side and scored a touchdown and looked like he was shot out of a cannon. He looked like Christian McCaffrey, his brother. He looked like his dad, who was this Olympic sprinter. His grandfather, who was the Olympic sprinter, or his dad, who was a wide receiver for the Broncos. The bloodlines. I thought Dylan McCaffrey, he looked like he could have been the great, and just the limited amount of snaps that I saw him, he looked like he could have been the greatest Michigan quarterback of all time. I was surprised that Michigan went with Joe Milton. It wasn't sight unseen. They saw him throwing the ball around in shorts and no pads. And, Joe Milton, the one thing, like if you say, let's go build a quarterback in the back and then put him out on the field, what would he look like? Look a lot like Joe Milton, 6'5", 240, fast, could throw the ball the length of the field. Super, super passer, good athlete. I mean, all those things. But, I was surprised that he beat out McCaffrey. But that's my, and it's not a worry spot. It's just like, and I want to see more of McCarthy, but it's not like McCarthy. You have to go back to Drew Henson and say, man, there hasn't been a guy like McCarthy or the excitements in Drew Henson. Yeah, there was. And it was just a couple years ago. And he did look great. And I was surprised that he didn't win the job. I was surprised he transferred. I'm surprised that when he transferred, he didn't go to wherever he went, Northern Colorado, and light it up there. Very surprising for all of that. I know when it comes down to Joe Milton. Let's see, Twitter. There's a lot of tweets coming through here. There was Matt, Bob. This doesn't make sense. Okay. I'm working on Twitter Spaces. If you're on Twitter, you can see my Twitter handle there, @Dennis50. I don't tweet as much as a lot of people. Like I'm kind of a streaky tweeter. Sometimes I'll sit down and I'll watch a game and I'm like, I'm going to tweet. And I'm in there and I'm responding to everybody and I'm going back and forth. And then I'll take days, sometimes weeks, before I can post another tweet. I should probably at least put one out there a day. So I think we've handled everything on a Monday. Is 10-2 a good year for Michigan? No. Can Michigan hang with Ohio State? Yes, I think they can. And I think one of the big parts about hanging with Ohio State, it's going to be tough. And I'm not picking Michigan to go undefeated. I am predicting them to lose that last game. And these are the things with predictions. As soon as as September 3 gets here, who cares what everybody picks? It's just a guy, just see where everybody's at. You throw it out of the window. But if Michigan goes 11-0 and we're sitting here on game week, it's going to be a holiday week. You're going to have Thanksgiving and everything going on. And then you're going to have Michigan at Ohio State on the 25th if they're undefeated. I'm not going to be sitting here all like, well, before the season, I said that they were going to lose, so I'm sticking with it. I could easily see a flip. Now, I don't always want to be a flip-flopper, but I could see it. And I think there's a lot of people that are 11-1 will be flipping right there with me. But let's wait and see. But do I think that they can hang with them? I want to say it today. I think they can. I think their offense has juggernaut capabilities. I like what I see from the defense. We'll see there. But then, the one thing about Ohio State is the Buckeyes, they were in Michigan's head. And it's what happens after you lose 1, 2, 3, 4, the whatever it was, the 100 times in a row, the twice, this century they had won. That is going to, no matter how much you say this is a new year, this is a new game, it's gonna be in your head. It's gonna be there. I mean, the coaches, it's with the fans. You're expecting the other shoe to drop. All of those things. They got rid of that. They were able to break through. So confidence-wise, that was a huge thing. I'm not saying that's the thing that's going to override them, but they've got the team now and the confidence. What's Harbaugh? He said it a few times over the last year that what he likes about this team, they don't flinch. And that's a good quality to have if you're going to go on the road and take on what looks like an extremely explosive offense. And I'm sure a riled up Buckeye team because they lost and everybody was finally able to laugh at them. All of those things, that motivation, and for all the truck drivers that'll be down there, that should be going nuts. But, Michigan, you should feel pretty good if you're a Michigan fan about the season and about the opportunity to go down there. I don't just sit here and say, oh, they're never going to win down there. Oh, absolutely not. No, they can win down there. They got guys that know how to do it and then have done it. That's a big deal. It's great to be able to believe that you can do it, but then believing and then doing it, that helps. And I know Antoine thinks they can do it because every day, or at least once a week, he says he thinks they can. Antoine says the media. Let's see what he says about the media. The media gave Jim Harbaugh that label. As far as I'm concerned, he has the mindset of a linebacker and running back. People just taking things and running with it. I'm not actually sure what label you're talking about. I'd have to go through. Let me see if it goes back. Yeah, I don't know what label you're talking about, Antoine, with the media. But is it possible that the media has labeled Jim Harbaugh incorrectly? It's possible. Okay. So you get to this point and you're a Michigan football fan. You've been through all of the topics. You've been through the schedule. You've, some of these things you feel like you've been, hit over the head with them because it's on a day-to-day basis. And just remember, I'd say it's good. We're close that way. We, for me, I'll be condensing these topics and talking about what I think is most important leading up to the opener. So we'll get into the lab. One thing that I am extremely excited about is my screen over here being able to bring some. I got a new toy, and I just was able to use it last night, and it's working. So I've got some exciting things, and even this week I'll be able to break that out. So, and I'm looking forward to doing that. Thanks everybody for the feedback. Your likes, and you just leaving your responses here all through the show, all of that, follows, all that stuff helps. And we'll see you over on the Maize and Blue review. We'll be back here tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Until then.